I can go first. My name is Holly Anderson. I'm a senior here at USC. I'm in an industrial and systems engineering major, and then I have a business finance minor. In terms of internship experience I had after my freshman year, I entered at a company called Aldridge Electric, which is a construction management company. I got this through two of my uncles who worked there. The following summer, I worked at another construction management company called FH Passion. After that, I realized construction management wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, so I started heavily recruiting for consulting. And I ended up interning at KPMG this past summer, and I will be going there full time after I graduate. And all my internships were in Chicago. I'm from Chicago, and we'll be going back there after graduation.
And then I'm McCarthy. I am a senior majoring in computational neuroscience with a minor in management consulting. And I came into USC being a neuroscience major, and I was pre-med, but I was kind of uncertain about it. I didn't exactly know what route I wanted to go. And I really dove into the experiences and opportunities that USC offered. So I did some research positions, like lab work, and I was taking some of the pre-med classes, but I just kind of realized through my experiences that I really liked the field of healthcare, but I didn't want to be in it from the like med school angle or the doctor angle, I guess. And so after my sophomore year, I worked at Barrow Neurological Institute in their innovation center, and I was a student research intern. And it was really cool. I was working in a lab with engineers and neurosurgeons, working on improving processes in surgery. And so that experience was really cool, but it made me realize like I kind of want to zoom out and maybe see this field from like a business side. So then, like Holly, who actually is part of my like inspiration in my journey because I didn't really know what consulting was. I kind of followed in her footsteps, learned about consulting and recruiting and all of that. And last summer, I did healthcare consulting at a firm called Protivity. Um, and that was really cool seeing the field of healthcare from a business angle. And then I was going to return to them, but I recently got a different opportunity working at a venture capital firm in the biotech and healthcare space. And so I'll be returning to Phoenix after college to do that.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Lila. I'm also a senior. I'm a public policy major, legal studies minor. So I'm intersection between law, government, and nonprofits. I was very set on working in the policy, social impact sphere pretty much all throughout college. And I've done a good number of different internships and volunteer positions to kind of hone that interest. I've worked in government, so I interned for U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth, so I did a congressional internship, and then I've worked for a series of nonprofits in affordable housing, reentry policy, and environmental policy. And now I feel pretty confident in my interest in strategic communications and nonprofit work and policy work. And so I'm currently interviewing for postgrad positions, mainly in the nonprofit.
Great. So now that we've got a little bit of an overview of who is actually up at the front of the table here, we're going to hear a little bit more about their journey, their challenges, how they've been able to work through this process, as well as what has it been like when there's been uncertainty or rejections or, just maybe even some of those additional stressful situations that they have encountered through every little step. I've had fortunate pleasure to be working with them for a couple of years now. So lots of semesters, lots of different twists and turns along the way. But really, it's our hope that you're going to gain not only some practical advice that you can, really apply immediately, but really think about how is this information going to provide maybe a little bit more insight to where you are, whether it's for an internship or a job or, next steps with that. So just kind of get started a little bit. What would be one word that you'd use to describe your job search experience? And we'll say job or internship search, just since we've got some first years in the crowd as well.
I can start with this one. I would say my job search was exciting. I think there definitely were times when there was rejection and frustration, but overall, I would say that I did have a positive experience with it. I really enjoyed recruiting because I saw it as a chance to really explore what I was interested in. Like I mentioned, I did a couple project management internships in construction. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. And then I really wanted to explore into other things. Consulting is a big thing that people in my major go into. So I started talking to people who were older than me, my peers in my classes who were also recruiting for it. And I was like, oh, this kind of sounds like something that I'd be interested. And the more that I talked to people doing consulting, the more I researched it, and the more I started recruiting for it, the more I realized this was something that I could really see myself doing. Then when it came to actually prepping for the interviews and stuff, I actually kind of found it fun. I mean, case interviewing is definitely something that's super interesting and not your typical interview. But I kind of saw it as a challenge. I'm someone who definitely likes to solve problems, and that's really what it's testing. So I kind of would say that the journey, although there definitely were times when you're frustrated and maybe you don't have the best confidence in yourself, I would say overall it was definitely exciting to find something that I'm looking forward to doing after graduation.
And then I would use the word unconventional, not to say that anything in this market is like going to be conventional, but I would use the word unconventional because coming from like such an initially uncertain place of like what I wanted to do and coming from a neuroscience background, trying to be in business, I kind of had to really work with how to tell my story and how to like yeah, just tell the story to in my interviews of like why I wanted to be in business or in consulting when like all my classes were like biology basically. And so that kind of took some creativity and it took I guess I'm calling it unconventional because it's like I think for me there was a really big importance in finding connections and like reaching out to people and doing a lot of networking early on because that's kind of what really got the ball rolling for me is the connections that I made along the way through my own networking.
Yeah, I would say similar to McCarthy. I was gonna say like widespread. I feel like when I entered USC, I feel like everyone had like a dream job, you know what I mean? In like a very specific field, doing a very specific thing. And I think you learn pretty quickly that like that's just not how everything always shakes out. But the really exciting part about the job and internship search is that there are so many possibilities. And so I think one of the things that, especially in like my search for a full-time position, is that you have so many interests and there's so many things to do in the world. And so I think it's really kind of fun to explore all of those possibilities because you'll find things that maybe you didn't necessarily know you were interested in or know that you had a passion for. Like strategic communications was something that like I kind of stumbled upon. And now I really love it. And it's something that I'm really trying to incorporate like in the job search. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for new paths that you maybe didn't expect.
So thank you all for sharing. As you can see, everyone's got their own little route. I know it's easy to be trying to compare our own situations, but really kind of just know that each of you are carving your own path at this point. But let's dive a little bit deeper into kind of, a little bit more behind the scenes. And so for this next idea and looking at kind of the reality of recruiting, how many roles did you apply to? And what did the response rate actually look like? This is always one of my favorite ones because when I meet with students and I hear, I applied to 3 and I haven't heard from them. Is that realistic? Please share some of your own expertise.
Yeah, I can go first. I don't know if I have a specific number, but when I started applying to consulting roles, I would say probably around 100, and I probably only got interviews with like 3 of those. I think you definitely like I also know people who applied to like 5 roles and got interviews at 2 of them and got their job through that. But I mean, also a lot of those applications I'm talking about just like clicking through Handshake and like apply, 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 which I don't know how successful those are. I mean, people have had success stories, but I think it just goes to show that applying to jobs, like McCarthy mentioned, goes beyond just applying, but actually networking with people in those companies. I think it really can do a lot. The companies that I ended up getting interviews at, I definitely had networked with people there. So I think I can attest to that. But yeah, it can definitely be frustrating. I think one tip I would say is to try to keep all of this organized. Like when you're applying to this many jobs, you can't physically keep this all in your head in one place. So I made like a spreadsheet to organize everything, like what's the job? When's the due date? Do I know anyone who works here? Have I applied yet? Have they responded? When's my interview? Like just having that all organized in a spreadsheet worked really well for me just to keep everything straight because otherwise I think I just would have gotten way too overwhelmed and forgotten half of the jobs I applied to and following up on them and things like that. But yeah, I definitely applied to a vast amount.
Yeah. I would second that. Over the past 2 or 3 years, I would definitely say I've applied to probably around 100. And over the past 2 or 3 years, I've probably interviewed with like maybe like 12 to 15 different companies, but also that's because of like the wide disparity of like the fields that I was starting out at, like the fields I've kind of like jumped around into. But yeah, and again, not all 100 of those are like ones I've spent a ton of energy on, but like the clicking through, but I pretty quickly learned like that wasn't probably gonna work for me. Like the ones that I just clicked through, dropped my resume in, that type of application, like those responses are very, very few. Like the numbers, the actual interviews I got were likely from ones that I had spent a lot of time like trying to connect with people in that company beforehand, meeting actual recruiters at the career fairs here, or yeah, just kind of doing my own research on there and like just really seeking those out, spending more time and energy on those companies.
Yeah, I would say I've applied to a little bit less than them, but I think that's because the nature of my field is a lot of them require like writing samples or stuff like that. So I think that a lot of times in fields like that, I feel like the application materials are typically a little bit more time consuming. So still, I would probably say over the 4 years, like 80, maybe 75, like still a lot, but definitely a little bit less. And then response rate on that, my summer after my sophomore year, when I did my congressional internship, which was like, I was like so happy about it. Like that's like what you want if you're a public policy major, you know what I mean? Like you want a congressional internship. That was the only interview I had for that summer. And so like if that had not worked out, no idea what I would have done. So it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like my favorite thing to talk about this is like, you really, really only need one thing to work out. And so even when you're applying to so many things, like it gets really stressful and it's really tiring to do it, but like you really just need one thing to work out. Like you don't need 10 options, like you need one. And so I think that's one of the things where I figured out. And then I think also to segue on the networking thing right now for the full-time job search, I've interviewed for a good number of places and everyone I've interviewed for, I've networked for before. So when I was submitting it, I was messaging people on LinkedIn, I was cold emailing, I was trying to use my networking connections. I have not heard back from a job that I actually, yeah. So everything that I've interviewed for so far, I've had that networking aspect too. And I think that that's really helped.
Really shows the power of communication and networking, and that it is always in the student's best interest to try to do it before you are maybe desperate for it, but try it a little bit more in advance there. So what surprised you the most about the recruiting process?
Um, I would say what surprises me the most, and it's, I guess, kind of like is the most frustrating, is that like you could spend so much time and energy with a company, like make it through like 4 rounds of their interview process, and then they have the right to reject you and give you no explanation as to why. Like that comes as a surprise because it's like, how could you do this to me? Like, what? That's not right. I spent so much time and energy on you guys, and then they can just flat out reject you and they don't owe you an explanation. And I guess that's kind of a surprise because it almost feels a little like inhumane when you're going through it, but it's just the reality of the job search.
Yeah, mine's pretty similar. I interviewed 3 times for a company and then got ghosted, which felt really great. So I think it's one of those things where it's like you put so much time and care into your applications and you're like, wow, I'm the type of person where I'm like, I really see myself at this job like after I've read it for 30 seconds, which you need to not be. And I was like, this is perfect, can't wait to move there. Then I never heard back. And I was like, awesome. So it's one of those things where it's like you have to become a little desensitized to the process. Like it's a numbers game for them. It's a hard thing for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And another thing I would add, something that surprised me is sometimes how early you have to be applying to these roles. I remember like my junior year, I felt so behind. There was one girl in my class who like literally came into the first day of class and she like listed every single company that she had applied to. And I was like, okay, I haven't even looked at this yet. Like you were overwhelming me so much. Like I'm so stressed out. Like, should I apply to all these companies right now? Like, what do I do? But I think just trying to get as ahead of the game as possible. I think all of you guys being here, sitting here today is a great start. But also knowing at that point I wasn't too far behind. A lot of, especially in consulting, there are multiple cycles. So especially for like the big three, there's like a summer cycle where you can apply and then also a fall cycle. But just knowing that in the back of your head, like if you really do want to work somewhere, really making sure you understand their application timeline so that you're not missing it. Yeah, so that was, I guess, would be something that surprised me.
So it could be a humbling and very intentional. So something to think about. Did your recruiting timeline go as planned or did it change?
I can start because I think mine is the worst so far. I would say I started applying for jobs loosely for post grad in October. I have yet to receive an offer. So that I don't think is going amazingly well. But it's one of those things where the reality of the job market is what it is. I've had a lot of problems in the sector that I'm in with funding for roles getting cut. And so it's not gone exactly as predicted. I think my goal was to have a job by April. It is now April. But I think that one of the things that you learn from talking to a lot of people, especially people that have graduated recently in my field, is most people I know that got full-time job offers got it in like late May, right after graduation, in June. Like the timeline for it is just much differently. So a lot of the roles that I was applying to, I think in the winter, they just weren't necessarily hiring those full-time roles that would have started in the spring. Like I was just kind of misaligned with the company's timeline. And so I think that I'm feeling a lot better about where I am now, even though it's not necessarily where I wanted to be. Through talking to other folks and realizing that this is actually a very accurate timeline for my field. It's just for business and stuff like that, that's not how their timeline works. And that's what most of my friends are in. So I had a lot of trouble, like, I guess not feeling bad about that. But it's just a much different field with much different companies and their timelines. And like nonprofits timelines, sorry, like I love nonprofits, they take forever. Like forever to interview you. It's just they don't have big resources to like be doing it super quickly. And so I think that's one of the things that's really hard. But it's one of those things that I've like come with.
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, there's nothing too unexpected about my timeline, I guess, because I didn't really know what to expect. But like the internship that I got after my sophomore year summer, I got that in March. And then I started that summer, and that was again through a connection that I had made prior. Just simply doing like searching and stalking on LinkedIn, I guess, at like the companies that I wanted to be at or the places I wanted to be. And then after I learned all about consulting and all of that, I did realize I was a little bit behind going into the cycle because people do start so early, and I was kind of like jumping in late. But I just really got on top of it immediately. And then that opportunity, which I kind of attribute, like, I definitely attribute like where I am now and the confidence I feel going into the future, knowing that I want to be at the intersection of healthcare and business. I guess I would attribute it to this, which is that I was actually working at an event like for the Career Center, and then I just walked outside and there was the USC Career Fair going on. And one of the booths was a firm that I had heard of. And I had like applied a couple days prior. And so I went up to that booth, and there was a recruiter there. And then we just started chatting naturally. And I found out he was from Arizona. So we kind of made a good personal connection. And then he ended up like saying, I'm going to push your application through. I want you to get interviewed. And then that's the job I ended up getting for my junior year summer. And then after my junior year summer, most people from that internship did get a return offer, but I didn't want to necessarily like take the first thing I could get. I wanted to see what else was out there. So then I just kind of kept recruiting throughout this year, and like to be able to see what comes about. And so that's how I ended up getting this new opportunity quite recently.
Yeah, I would say similar to McCarthy, my timeline was pretty normal, I guess. I mean, I don't even think anyone's timeline is normal. It's going to look different for everybody and definitely depends on what field you're in. But similar to McCarthy, like I said, I definitely felt a little behind at first. It's really hard, especially at USC, not to compare yourself to the people around you. So I just give you guys a little bit of grace with that. Like we're surrounded by people who are doing amazing, awesome things, which is great, but also it's sometimes hard to be putting yourself right next to them and not comparing yourself to them. So just give yourself a little bit of grace with that. Like you guys also are amazing and will find your spot. But I think one thing I will say with my timeline is something that I didn't even maybe realize is where I ended up today is I went to a program with KPMG after my sophomore year summer called Women in Advisory. And this was something that they presented pretty casually as like, oh, come learn about consulting, about being a woman in consulting and things like that. And I was like, oh, I'll go. And I got to go down to Florida for 3 days at their training facility. And it was super fun. I got to meet a bunch of people, talk to a bunch of people. But I think that's definitely probably where my networking all stemmed from. I got to connect with like the USC recruiter. I got to meet a bunch of people in the Chicago office and things like that. So I think like just like I said earlier, like starting as early as possible. If there's companies or things that you're interested in, don't be afraid to start exploring them now, regardless of what year you are. You never know what opportunity is going to present or who you'll talk to that maybe can help you down the line.
As you can see, that the recruiting timelines and calendars, there's no straightforward answer. There's a lot of twists and turns, whether it's the market, whether it's just, situational. But now let's kind of switch over to what actually works, right? There's so many different pieces of this, and how important is networking in your process? And I know you've talked a little bit about that, but can you give specific examples? Things that maybe they can do as you heard each of them, talk a little bit about their majors or what their years in school are, anything that you would want to share as a specific, unique example.
Yeah, I can go first. It kind of piggybacks off my last answer. So, like I said, I went to KPMG's program and got to meet a lot of people there. And I connected with the USC recruiter there. So she's basically just a recruiter at KPMG who specifically focuses on students at USC. And I remember when I was going to apply for my internship for after junior year, I had decided, I was like, okay, risk advisory is exactly what I want to do. The people I'm talking to is exactly what I want to do. Like, this is perfect. And then the day that the internship drops, I went on the KPMG website and I was like, risk advisory isn't an option. That what's going on? Like, I freaked out. I was like, I knew this is what I wanted to do. So then I reached out to my recruiter and she was very personable. Like, she was always like, come to me with any questions you guys have. And I reached out to her and I was like, hey, I'm not seeing risk advisory posted. What's going on? She was like, oh, we're actually not offering that this summer. But she knew like my major and that I wanted to be in Chicago. She's like, but I would recommend you apply to customer and operations instead. It's pretty similar. I think you'll have a great shot at it and things like that. So I applied to that. That's what I ended up doing this past summer. And I think just having that connection with a recruiter or just with someone who works at the company and having that little bit of insight into it is really, really helpful going through recruiting. I think even if you think you know a lot about the company, obviously they're going to know more and will always have advice to give you. Like in that example, like I literally didn't know what to apply to next. And she was like, oh, Holly, you'd be a great fit for customer and operations. Just apply to that instead. I think you'll like it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend just trying to reach out to people in the company. Even if that's a cold email or a LinkedIn message, you never really know where that relationship will go to. So yeah, definitely just reach out and build that network beforehand.
Mhm. And then, yeah, I would say that networking has played a very pivotal role in my USC experience. The example from the career fair is an example of how I got that job initially. But then also not even with the motive of like getting a job or an internship out of it. I just really think it's important to network in general. And that's what's helped me kind of realize where I want to be and like the direction I want to go for my career because I've sought out like a lot of USC alumni who are doing just cool things in cool spaces that I'd maybe see myself in or want to be in. And so through those conversations, I've kind of been able to realize what opportunities are out there, what's available. Because especially coming from a STEM background, sometimes I think it's easy to feel siloed into a specific path. So like a lot of pre-med like typical pre-med majors such as neuroscience tends to have either like a PhD or a medicine path. And I didn't feel that either of those was right for me. And it's very easy to feel like stuck in that. But through the conversations that I've had with different USC alum who've had like similar majors and are in cool companies or cool industries now, I've like sought them out on LinkedIn, asked for cold calls, asked for just coffee chats. And they have helped me realize along the way, like where I can be and how many opportunities are really out there. And so, and then one, I guess, like more unique example is that I had found during my sophomore year, I was just kind of like browsing different professors at USC that I thought would be interesting to talk to. And I found this one professor with his PhD in neuroscience, who's a professor in Marshall. And I was like, this is exactly the intersection I'm looking for. So I found out what his class schedule is and I found out what his office hours are. And I just showed up to his office hours and I just kind of like picked his brain for a while. And he gave me this piece of advice, which was to just chase the things that make your heart race. That's exactly what he said. And that's exactly what I've done and what I do through the conversations that I have with just like alum and stuff. And that's gotten me to where I am now.
I think that my best example of networking helping was I was in a club my junior spring. And we had a guest speaker that worked in reentry policy, which is a sphere I'm super interested in. He is a Price alum, so we had like that instant connection, which is like why he was there to speak to us. And afterwards I basically begged like the person who had brought him in for like his contact info. And there was this, we were doing this whole project where basically we each got paired with a mentor. And so they had each of the mentors like come in and speak. And he was like, no, like I had picked someone else for him. Like, I'm sorry, like there's another person, like I think will be really great for you. And I was like, I'm sure they're gonna be absolutely brilliant, but like I feel so connected to the work this guy does. Like I really would love to either like be able to meet up with him or to like be his mentee on this project. And they were like, okay, I guess like whatever, that's fine. 'Cause, they didn't really care. And so we got to work together all semester. He ended up coming to like the big event I hosted. And we got along great and like really maintained that connection all throughout that semester, all throughout the summer. And then at the start of my of my fall of my senior year, he reached out and he's like, hey, like, would you want to work for me? And I was like, yeah, I would. That'd be really great. So and then I like did that internship that whole semester. And it was like such a great learning experience for me and like one of my favorite internships I've ever done. And it was all because I like chased after a guy in our club and was like, please pair me with him. And so that's one of those things where it's like you can cold email guest speakers that you have in your classes. You can talk to your professors, you can do those kinds of things. And even if it doesn't necessarily get you an internship, it can still get you really great experience and really great knowledge and build that relationship. And so now that I'm, job hunting, like he like texts me LinkedIn posts and he's like, hey, you should apply to this. And I'll be like, that's not at all what I want to do, but like, thank you for sending me that. I really appreciate it. He's like one of my biggest supporters. So it's been a really great relationship for me to have.
So if anything, you gotta be persistent.
Yes.
You gotta really stay focused on the task at hand. And I think kind of a fun question to maybe think about is, what do you think employers are really looking for that students overlook? We're giving them all the ideas of things that they can do, but maybe something they're not thinking about.
Holly and I were just talking about this yesterday, but like being personable in an interview, I think like you can be as prepared as possible, but sometimes they're going to choose like the person that they might have the most fun working with over the person who's like the smartest or the most prepared in the room. And so I think it's important to, in interviews, let your like passion and excitement and personality really shine through.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I remember one piece of advice I got when I was prepping for interviews. I was talking to one of my older sister's friends, and she works at McKinsey, and I like look up to her as someone. And she was like, yeah, I remember in my McKinsey interview, the guy came on and he had an Alabama flag in the back, and I was like, OMG, roll tide. And she's like, I was holding my breath that he wasn't going to ask me any other questions about Alabama because I knew nothing about it. But just like making that little effort to show that you're not just an applicant, like you are a real person who they would enjoy working with, I really do think is that special touch. And also just making sure as much as the company is interviewing you, you should also kind of be interviewing them and make sure that it's a good match for you. So looking at their values, talking to people that work there, seeing what the day-to-day is like, be really thinking like, oh, is that somewhere I could see myself? And then if it is somewhere you could see yourself, I think that going through the interview, just kind of trying to show those values, showing how you exemplify them, will definitely convince the interviewer that you would be a good fit for them.
Yeah, I have two parts to my answer. I think the first is being polite and being aware of their time. I think that a lot of times when folks come to me and like talk about their networking stuff, they're like, yeah, I cold emailed them and I sent them my resume and my writing samples. And I'm like, they're not reading that on a cold email. Like they're not gonna do that. And so I think being really aware of what people have the capacity for and do not have the capacity for. And so when you're reaching out and when you're doing those cold emails and those LinkedIn DMs and stuff like that, keeping it short and sweet and giving it, but being very polite and very conscious of their time, I think is really important. And the second thing, kind of like what Holly said, I think is researching your interviewer. If you have the names of who your interviewers are, especially if it's like a panel interview or something like that, like go LinkedIn stalk them, see what they've done, see if there's anything that you can bring up to the conversation to like honestly fake a connection with them if you have to, because you want to be personable and you want them to remember who you are versus all of the other candidates that, they interviewed. I had an interview yesterday and I had stalked the whole panel and one of the people had just graduated with her MPH and I was like, wow, I like think I might want to get my MPH later. So I brought it up and she was like, wow, that's so great. I'd love to talk to you about that if you're interested. I'm such a big advocate for it. And I feel like that really built a very like instant connection between us. And so that's like a really small thing you can do that, like you guys are all on social media, you know how to stalk people, can really help, I think, increase your banter and like your remembrance factor.
So as you can see, as you continue to go through this process, that recruiting is unpredictable and you have to just keep continuing down this process. And so as we start to think about maybe some of the threats, the rejection and the uncertainty, how would you deal with this rejection or being ignored? You know, I know it's hard to try to stay focused on that, but is there anything in particular that you've done in your, journey that you think would be helpful for the students to hear?
Yeah, I can start for this one. One thing I'll say is to try to not take it personally. And I know that sounds kind of silly because obviously they're evaluating you as a person that they want to work or not work with. But a lot of times it's just like that you weren't a perfect fit for it, or someone else maybe they see it as a better fit. And it's hard to not take those things personally, but just know that I truly believe like everything happens for a reason. Like if they don't want you to work there, it's probably for a reason. You'll probably be happier somewhere else. And then the second thing I would say for that is, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Somebody else can go. I'll see if it comes back to me.
Following up on that, I also think there's always things that are out of your control in these processes. And so if you interview them and they don't pick you, or if they don't even pick you to interview at all, like you have no idea why that was. You have no idea what the factors are. Maybe they already picked another candidate, maybe they've already been doing interviews. Like it doesn't give you, like it doesn't help you at all to overthink that part of the process. And that's one of those things that it's really like you learn through doing it. Like it sucks to get rejected, it sucks to not hear back from stuff. And it still sucks now, but it's one of those things you just have to brush it off and keep moving forward. And then I also think another really important thing is that even if you don't get your perfect job or your perfect experience, you can learn so much at every role that will help you then later get maybe your perfect job or your perfect experience. If that even is your perfect job, you know what I mean? And so I think don't look down on opportunities that you didn't necessarily want as much, or you didn't necessarily think were going to be your right fit, because an opportunity is an opportunity. And so I think that even if you're rejected from things that you're like, my heart was set on that, like that doesn't mean there's not tons of new doors to open and new directions to go. It's just one of those things you kind of got to bite the bullet, brush it off and keep going.
Totally agree with that. I think you can absolutely get value from any job or experience that you have, and your first couple internships or jobs following graduation is not the end all be all. And as I was talking about how like I had to tell my story in a certain way to try to like get my foot in the door in the field of business, like you can always make a story out of whatever experience it is you did have, and those are all just like stepping stones to where you want to be next. And so like what I would advise for the recruiting process is just to have grit and not give up, because it is so hard to like get those rejections and nearly impossible to not take them personally sometimes. But you just like got to keep going and kind of trust that you'll be able to eventually connect the dots backwards and understand why it is you didn't get that opportunity.
And I remember the second thing I was going to say, this applies a little bit more, I guess, to like case interviewing or like more technical interviews, but use those as practice. And also a lot of times at the end of case interviews, I would ask the person interviewing me, like, is there anything that I can improve on? Like, even if I knew I wasn't going to get the job, I think you can use that as such live practice and live feedback. And they'll a lot of times be super honest with you and be like, oh, you did this really well, but I could see a lot of growth for improvement in this area. And then getting that feedback going into your next interview, you'll be that much more confident, that much more prepared, and that much more likely to get the job, so just, even if it's not a positive right away, like McCarthy said, it could be a positive later down the line.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. And what kept you motivated during this process? I know that it's easy to brush it off and move forward, but were there things in particular that, you have found that were great practices or strategies or things that, you might be able to offer? I think one of the biggest challenges is students get closer to the end of the semester, closer to summer, there's maybe that feeling of, well, should I keep applying? Is that something that I should do? And if you come to the Career Center and have a one-on-one appointment, we're going to give you about 5 different strategies to keep trying and have you work through the Trojan Network and LinkedIn and really utilize everything that, Holly, McCarthy, and Lila are telling you right now. And so, is there anything in particular that you think can be focused around that whole motivation?
I think in terms of motivation for so once you maybe get that interview, in terms of motivation to prep for that, I would say just finding other people who are also going through this experience, whether this is your peers, your roommates, or whoever it may be, maybe your siblings or whatever it is. And just like talking about it out loud. I know it sounds kind of silly, but like first of all, just talking about the experience and talking about your emotions, like I think will really help you through it. I think just like talking, being like, I'm really stressed for this interview coming up, and just having someone knowing about it and being like, oh, wishing you good luck before it or whatever it may be. But then also too, like physically talking through your interview questions, like practicing behavioral questions and things like that, I think is super helpful. Again, it's just going to help you to be that much more comfortable walking into that interview. It's not the first time you've said this out loud. You know, you have your stories down pat, you're ready to go, and you're walking in like comfortable and confident and really excited about the next step.
I think one of the things that I think has been really helpful is from people I've networked with, past bosses, stuff like that, having support in the professional world of people who I worked with before who know me and trust me and can be like, look, this is not on you. Like a lot of times, like you'll have to ask people like for recommendation letters and stuff like that. And I think that being able to build a network of people that support you and believe in you, that it's not just like, you know, your parents, your friends, and stuff like that. Like, of course they believe in you, but people that you work with that you can lean on and you can ask for, you know, their help and advice about the application process, I think is really, really helpful. And it can be like, you know, mentors from old internships. It can be people that maybe you didn't work with in that close of capacity. But I think having people in the professional world that you can lean on, and can always like fall back on and ask for their help and stuff has been really helpful and motivational.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I think that it is like makes it a little bit fun to like find a community in it. So when we were interviewing for like case interviews and stuff like that, I remember finding a lot of like people doing similar things, and you would meet up with them, run through a case together. Even like two of our roommates today were like one of them who's in engineering was helping our other roommate like prep for interview in a totally different field, but it just kind of forms like a community. And yeah, and then also I did find it throughout the process a little bit energizing, realizing like how much I was learning throughout the process, and also prepping for interviews, I think makes you a lot more well spoken, and all of that was like exciting to me that I was learning so much about the field that I know I'm going into, and also just becoming more articulate in it.
Thank you for your vulnerability. I think it's something that students don't typically hear from one another. You make that assumption that we're at USC, no one has ever been rejected, everyone's gotten this. I mean, all of you have gone through some sort of process like this when you apply to colleges. And if you were one of the lucky ones that got in everywhere and didn't get a rejection letter, you know, congratulations. But at some point that will run out and the reality will set in. So I certainly do appreciate you giving some strategies that will help to overcome that. Looking back, what would you tell your past self during the most stressful part? As seniors, just a few weeks from graduation, is there anything that you would want to try to tell your younger self, maybe that first or second year, who was uncertain about the field or thinking about pivoting or things weren't going out as, you know, dreamlike?
I think one of my favorite pieces of advice that I've been given is what's meant to be will never pass you by. My junior spring, Lauren is very familiar with this story because she was my boss while it was happening. I had a job in summer all set up with a nonprofit. I was so excited about it. I did tons of interviews. I was like, this is the best. And then the funding position got cut. And they were like, you can work in a volunteer capacity, which I just did not have the financial capability to be doing unpaid work all summer. And especially it was in a new city, like it wasn't feasible for me. And so I was like, that happened in like late March. And I was like, awesome, I have no job, I have nothing, I'm gonna fail, it's terrible. I was in such a terrible place. And I ended up, you know, spam applying to a lot of stuff, spam networking with a lot of people. And one of my roommates had done a fellowship the summer before. And she's like, hey, like, I've never really talked to you about this, but like, you said you've been interested in like health policy, right? Like, are you at all interested in like reproductive health and like sexual rights? And I was like, yeah, I am. Like, I've never really like done anything like substantive in it, but like, I could be interested in it. And so I ended up applying to it. I did the program all summer and it was like hands down my favorite thing I've ever done. It was in strategic communications. And so I worked with a nonprofit and created like a whole branding kit and advocacy campaign for them. And I like really, really, really loved doing that kind of work where you got to do a bunch of research and then actually create something that connected with people and helped connect people to resources. And so I think that knowing how stressed I was when that other position fell through, and then knowing that something so great and so wonderful came of it, I think it's one of those things where it's like you really just have to keep searching for new opportunities. And it's one of those things where it's like, if it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't meant to be. And that's I mean, maybe that's a coping mechanism. Like what I would say is like when I get rejected from something, I was like, oh, I would have hated it. I would have hated it. I would have hated that city. I would have hated that work. No problem. And like maybe that's not true, but it keeps you moving forward, and that's really what you got to do. And so I think that being available for unexpected good things is never a bad thing, even if it feels like it.
Yeah, I think that I would tell my like freshman and sophomore year self who was always freaking out about always freaking out and spiraling about like should I be continuing down the pre-med path or should I totally pivot? Is to spend less time in my own head and more time out in like the community of USC because it's really through like conversations and experiences and just like putting myself out there that I had the conversations and experiences and like both good and bad that like have just kind of like funneled me into where I'm gonna end up. And so, I guess, yeah, you can't really expect yourself to just like come up with this answer, in your own, like answer of what you should be doing, like in your own head. It's really through the experiences that you allow yourself to have that will allow you to realize that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think I would tell my younger self that we kind of touched on this, but like you don't have to get it right the first or second or even third time around. I think even just having somewhat of an internship after your freshman, sophomore, or junior year is very impressive in and of itself. It doesn't need to be the place that it's your dream job, you're so excited to go there. I think even jobs you accept after graduating, it doesn't have to be the place that you want to end up. I think always looking for that next thing and thinking about where you might end up next is exciting and will keep your career exciting. So just don't put so much pressure on having to like find the perfect spot right away.
I also think use USC's resources. Like you pay tuition at this school, like there are so many resources that USC has to help you with this. I wasn't really familiar with the Career Center until like I started working here, and there are so many amazing programs that I use now and resources. And so I would really, really recommend that like there's mock interviews, there's all that kind of stuff. And like I was always like, ooh, that sounds really scary. And it's like, would you rather mess up with the USC person or with the person you're interviewing with for the job? And so I think it's one of those things where you can be vulnerable and put yourself out there, but really using the resources USC has to offer because there are so many of them. I wish I was doing that when I was a freshman, but I just didn't really know about it.
Thank you. I think the biggest thing here is we just want to make sure that you're certainly being career ready, right? We want to make sure that you're taking advantage of sessions like this. You are also making use of the resources. You know, it's really important that after listening to them speak for a significant amount of time, want to think about what would be one actionable step that every student in this room could take even this week. Just try to continue to move forward and get that internship or job in this market, you know. Anything that you would want to share with them or give them as kind of a goal or maybe that purpose that they can think about to help enhance their experience?
I think if you don't have a LinkedIn, make a LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn, make it better. If you have a great LinkedIn, connect with more people, and that goes across the same thing. Connect with USC alums, use the Trojan Network. You can filter like when you're looking at like, oh, I'd love to work at this company. You can filter who works there and see if they went to USC, and then you can LinkedIn DM them, hey, fight on, want to talk? And you can like, sorry, it's very effective, guys. I'm really sorry. Don't say fight on first, say it at the end, but like whatever. And like there's for LinkedIn, you can do a month of premium for free where you can get like unlimited messaging. So if you're just starting your networking and stuff like that, I recommend doing it. Message as many people as you feel comfortable doing. I mean, I would say start with like 5 this week, but start slow, but I think it's a really important thing to get comfortable with.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I was starting with 5, then I was gonna make it a little easier, say 3. But 3 to 5, I would say find 3 to 5 USC alum and message them and set up okay, so I guess you need a message alum more in order to actually get those 3 to 5 chats set up, because similar to the job search, it takes spreading a wide net to actually get those responses back. But try to set up 3 to 5 coffee chats in the coming weeks with people who are in fields or have had job experiences that excite you or interest you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And one other thing I would say, if you don't already, create some sort of like organization chart or tracker for all of this. It's really hard to keep this all in your head. It's overwhelming as is, but if you just have this written down somewhere and organized, it'll make it a lot easier. You can keep track of who works at what company, what day you talk to them, what you talked about and just the things like that. It's way too much to keep in your head. So just create whatever it may be. For me, it was an Excel spreadsheet. That's just how my brain works. But just something to keep everything all in track.
I was gonna say, does anyone in the crowd have questions? Questions for the larger group? Yeah, please.
Sorry, let me go over the questions here. Oh yeah, what should we include in like our cold emails and messages on LinkedIn and stuff? Like, what do you guys suggest?
Yeah, so LinkedIn cold messages are hard because there's a limit to how many characters it can be. So you really gotta go short and sweet on them. It depends on, I think, what you're trying to get out of it. I think one of the most important things with cold messaging is it's not feeling transactional. So like, you're not asking for a recommendation, you're not asking for a job in a cold message. So I always been like, hi, my name is Lila, I'm a student at USC. I'd love to learn more about like your career path and what you're doing at this company. Would you have 10 to 15 minutes to chat sometime this week? Thanks so much.
Perfect.
Yeah, like you don't want to be like, I'd love a recommendation letter, I'd love a referral, I'd love a job. Even if that's what you want, you can't enter that way. Like you have to start on the your student use it and just be like, from a learning perspective,
Right.
I think that is the best way to address them. And like, I'm not a huge advocate of AI, but like it can help you cut down messages to 200 characters, 100 characters, whatever it is, because it is a really small amount that you can do.
Yeah, and then also like. I've been part.
Think about it, maybe someone else has another general question for delegates.
Yes, I was wondering if any of you guys had experienced like the higher view interviews or like video interviews before those like in-person or Zoom interviews, and I wanted to know like what has worked for you in those, because it's hard, you're not like speaking to anyone, but you also still want to show your best self, so I was wondering if there's any suggestions.
Yeah, I've done a few of those. I think I honestly don't know if I had any success with any of them from what I remember. But from what I do remember, they like give you the question and then like you don't have to start recording right away, or sometimes you do have to start recording, but you can redo it. But for the ones where if you don't have to start recording right away, like take a second and like even write down your answer if it helps you, and like practice saying it out loud once before you start recording yourself. Just so that when you do say it, you're not like, I don't know, and then the time runs out and you're like, oh shoot, I didn't get to say what I wanted to say, you know? I know sometimes they also do like start recording you right away, and those ones are kind of harder in the moment. Also another weird thing with those, one of my friends actually like, did research on this, but like make eye contact with your computer. One of my friends, I don't know if this is for every company, but did research on this, and like they don't even, some companies don't even listen to what you're saying. They're just looking at your facial expression. So it's like, are you making eye contact with the computer? Are you smiling? Are you showing like inflection while you're talking? Which I think is kind of crazy, but I guess it is just that first initial sweep. So just make sure, even if you do like write a script or something, still try to talk like naturally into the camera to show that like you're a real person who is answering it yourself.
Something I was told for hire view is to draw a stick figure on a post-it note, put it on your laptop, so you're talking to the post-it note. Because I like when I'm doing, it's just bad. It's putting the real people there. So I always look at my camera like in the corner of the Zoom, and so it's like to maintain eye contact up. I don't know. It just helps to remind me to be like up there, because it's so. I mean, I hate hire view interviews. They're really unnatural. But yeah, I think those are good tips.
Yeah. This will seriously dock my credibility on this panel, but I once had like one where it's like you had 3 opportunities to film, and then like I messed up every time, and then on the last one I messed up again, and I just shut my computer and was like, "This job." So no, I really dislike those, but yeah, it sounds like just like when you do submit it, it just gets like AI screened. It's just like another loop you have to jump through to get to the actual interview. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I have no right to speak on that.
But maybe it wasn't a.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
you're going to be
Exactly.
accepting the response, and you're
Yeah.
like, you know what, I believe in more personable, you know, in-person communication. That's where you then see the culture is not matching with who I am, so good night. That's
Yeah,
it, you make your decision. That was probably the best decision, Harvey. Other questions? Yes, please.
I just had one about one thing that, so like EMOC, right, the AI like scanner of your resume and cover letter. One of the things they mentioned is, okay, so you copy and paste in the job description, they're like, well, it doesn't include these like 5 buzzwords that you need to have. And it's because of like the AI screener that goes through all of the applications, like just for those like fast quick ones on Handshake, like they're not gonna read those, like unless they like have the buzzwords. And so I was just wondering, like outside of just using like networking to get a position, like did any of those fast ones actually end up like working, or did you try out the buzzword thing and did that actually work, or is just going off of that basis kind of just a waste of time, and should you just like focus more energy into networking?
I ended up having just like one general resume that I was using for everything, but I have done like no, I've tried VMOC, but I've also just used ChatGPT and I've put in the job description, put in my resume and been like, don't change much about my resume, but like give me suggestions on how I could incorporate like how I could tailor my resume to this job description. So like I've just used generally ChatGPT for that, but then even more so than VMOC, I've also taken my resume to the Career Center just for a drop in and like talk to an actual person and they've helped me tailor my resume to like certain jobs.
Yeah, I tweak my resume for most jobs that I apply to, but it's like little tweaks. It's like I'll change a phrasing or something like that, or if they really highlight something in the job description, I'll add that in or something like that. But I'm not like fully rewriting resumes, nothing like that. Like it's never been more than 10 minutes editing my resume. And then in terms of applying without networking, my congressional internship was just like a standard, like an application and nothing else, and then interview and everything like that. Yeah, so it does work.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely not a waste of time also because I feel like it doesn't take as much time to go through those ones. Like I don't know, I always go on Handshake when I'm like boarding class and
Yeah,
just like tap through all of them. Like those ones don't take as much like time and effort. You're not committing as much to it. Even if you are editing your resume here and there, like those ones are, I feel like a little bit more mindless. So like you can do those in your free time, maybe when you're multitasking, watching a show or talking to someone even or in class, whatever it may be. So I definitely wouldn't say it's a waste of time. Like you never really know what's going to come about. But yeah, I would also heavily vouch for networking, but that obviously does take much more of a time commitment and you can't be doing that at every company. So
I would say also, if you're finding a job you're really interested in, go to the jobs website and find the job posting there and apply there rather than through Handshake or LinkedIn or Indeed or like a secondary platform. Just because sometimes like I feel like stuff gets lost in translation there. I don't actually know the science behind that, but I have been told that many times. And so if you can find the actual job posted on the company website, always apply there versus Handshake, LinkedIn, or whatever.
And a lot of times people will see the position on Handshake, or they'll learn about the organization from Handshake. And then go with that lead to LinkedIn to see, are there USC alums, are there current interns, and that's a way to kind of ease into networking without going directly to someone who's in the management or, C-suite there. We probably have time for one more question. Did you want to ask? Did you have
Oh, yeah.
your hand up? Yes.
Forgot I had a question, but
Sorry.
this I realize this question might get a lot of different answers, but like, you have any insight on like how far ahead in advance or how early you should start reaching out to these kind of companies and like cold emailing people, whether that's like a full-time position or an internship, like what's that timeline would kind of look like?
Remind us what major were you? Not that it I guess.
Business, but I want to go to law, so it would be like
Yeah.
a law firm.
I love people.
I personally would say it's never too early to reach out to someone. If anything, you'll just be able to build that relationship more and more over time. Like I definitely wouldn't like if you find someone that you find interesting or like a USC alum at a company that you're interested, like don't hesitate to reach out. There's no harm in asking right in the moment. I think if anything, time will just be in your favor.
Yeah, I have two parts to answer. I think obviously whenever you can, however early, but I also think if you're reaching out in like say October and a position doesn't open up until March or something like that, if you're talking in October and then you're applying in March, you can't have no communication between those timelines. So like if you're gonna talk to them early, that's great. You have to like keep feeding that relationship, and it can be like really short updates. It can be like a monthly update or something like that. But you cannot talk to them once and then come March be like, hey, want to refer me? They're like, what? Who are you? And so I think that that's one of those things where if you are doing that well ahead of time, you just need to make sure you're maintaining those relationships, which is like, it can be really easy to do that. And then when applying for jobs and internships, what I've been told is it's always best to reach out before you apply and do that like that coffee chat or whatever before you're sending in your application, because that can change how you tailor your materials and stuff like that. But if the job's been up for a while, or if you're not going to have time to apply later, apply, because sometimes job postings can get taken down when they're full or when they've had too many applicants. And so you never want to miss out on a chance to apply because you're waiting to like have that coffee chat or something like that, because that'll also help in like the interview. And so that would be my advice.
Yeah. No, I don't really have anything further to say that, yeah.
All right, well, that's about time. So please join me in saying thank you to our panelists for all this great insight. So please. Hopefully with today's session, it gives you a little bit better perspective on the reality of, going through this recruitment process and even giving you some steps to continue to stay motivated and ready to advance yourself throughout the process. There is still some pizza here if you are interested. They are probably willing to share contact information, and there's certainly the opportunity to meet with any of them one-on-one for some time, not right now, obviously. We'll meet right now one-on-one with their contact information, but you can certainly follow up with them at a time that is convenient for all of you. But thank you again for joining us. Let us know how we can help, and we appreciate you participating tonight.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. I appreciate it.
It's great.
Sorry, I have one more personal.
Yeah, no, of course.
You mentioned